Today you have joined me and the collective Instagram community for a mental health conversation on Are You OK Day, which we are celebrating here in Australia. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Bunurong people, the traditional custodians of the land on which I speak to you from today. I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders here today, and pay my respects to your elders, past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome any people joining us today with their own mental health lived experience. I hope to champion the story that resides within you. You are stronger than you realize. Battling daily against much systematic discrimination and stigma, you carry an internal flame that deserves to shine bright. And I light this candle right now to remember you. You can't really see it. Let me put it up on this book. Oh, you can't even see that. Here we go. The candle shines bright and it is in the bottom of this screen. There we go. So here we are. We've made it to Are You OK Day for 2020. Here in Melbourne, we are enduring through an extended lockdown, and we're huddled inside our homes trying to somehow stay sane, trying to connect with people from the comfort of our couches, but through the lens of Zoom and through the lens of a camera. And it's not the same as in person, I can tell you that. But I wanted to come online today to share a bit about my lived experience of mental health, because I am convicted that peer support is most important during this time. And I think we have a lot to learn from one another about being okay and being sane and managing mental health. So a bit about my journey. How many years ago was it now? 5 years ago, I experienced an episode of mental ill health that resulted in my hospitalization for 2 months in the public mental health system. I was an involuntary patient, and it was a crisis situation. And it was also more complicated than just the traditional, anxiety and depression, which was what all my family knew about and nothing much else. And for me, this was one of the most challenging and life-changing moments of my entire life. I felt like I had lost all control or autonomy over my life, and I felt like, particularly in the public mental health system, I needed advocacy, and I really needed more support than what I got. And a lot of people experiencing the public mental health system just don't get the support that they need. And yeah, it was a really challenging time. I spent 2 months in hospital and then the rest of the year recovering. I remember at the start of that year, I had been studying full time, first year out of high school. I was pursuing university qualifications and doing so many things and so many fun things that you do in first year uni. And then it all came crashing down. Or within about the space of a week, I went from studying full time, doing dance classes almost every day, to being in hospital. And it was confronting, it was challenging. There was a lot of stigma around it as well. We couldn't really talk openly about it. But I also look back and I think, what would have happened if my parents were more aware of mental health? And could we have had an earlier intervention, Why did it take so long to work out there was something wrong? And I was not okay. I needed someone to say, are you okay? And actually listen for a response and be trained in knowing how to pick up on things that, were warning signs for me. And it's more than just feeling low for an extended period of time. Like mental health is so much more complicated than that. And to think that we can sum it all up by saying, are you okay, is, to be honest, is a limiting thing. But yeah, so I went through hospital and then I was recovering through the rest of the year, came out the other side. and was like, you know what, I need to go back to dance, because dance was everything that I had, and dance is the very expression that I identify with as an artist. So I went back to university. Instead of doing it full time, I went back one subject at a time. Painfully slow, but it was actually the therapy that I needed at the time, and it was the most healing journey for me, going back to uni and being able to create art despite experiencing mental illness. So I did that. The following year, I was like, you know what? I don't know enough about mental health, and maybe it would be a good idea to get more skills in mental health. So I started studying psychology, and I recently graduated from a bachelor in psychology and dance with distinction. And for me, studying psychology from a lived experience perspective is one of the most rewarding things, because you see it from the inside and you see it from the outside. And it's more than just training to me. This is like ingrained inside of me, and I was learning about mental health, but also applying it to on a very practical basis. And it has the capacity to change so many things. Lived experience does, and consumer leadership does. So I studied psychology. I'm now aspiring to become a psychologist. I'm looking to do honours year next year. I work as a psychosocial disability support worker. So I work with NDIS, which is the National Disability Insurance Scheme, as basically a mental health practitioner. I also am hoping to expand my services to include recovery coaching from a lived experience perspective next year, which is really exciting. And whilst I do that, I'm planning to do honours, which is great. But yeah, I'm looking into psychology, and I see it from the inside and I see it from the outside, and I'm convinced that psychology has something for everyone, and everyone needs to be on it. Everyone has an access point to psychology. You just need to open yourself to it and recognize that, you know, mental health awareness affects everyone positively if we do it right. So, Are You Okay Day? We've reached Are You Okay Day. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the meaning. So I just shared my lived experience. Now I'm going into my learned experience and sharing a bit of the gems that I have picked up along the way. So Are You Okay Day is basically a day dedicated to be able to advance conversations around mental health. It helps to develop community awareness around having conversations around mental health. So you may have seen some advertisements for Are You Okay Day recently. The biggest sort of the guidelines they give you is ask, are you okay? That's the first question to do. If you're concerned about someone, ask them, are you okay? Listen with an open mind, encourage action, and then check in again. Consistency is key. My only concern with this approach, though, is that it might not meet the complexities that mental health requires. And so when you're asking someone, are you okay, we have to be prepared to receive the response. And if someone's not okay and they tell you, it's not good form, and it's not really duty of care if you're going to respond to that but not do it in an ethical way and in a responsible way. So if you're asking the question, you need to be willing to deal with the answer, and there's a responsibility around this. But at the same point in time, guys, I know a lot of you tuning in right now are from Melbourne, and we're facing COVID-19 head on, and it's a crisis, and we're in lockdown. It's important to be self-aware enough to know if you are prepared for an answer. Because what if you're not okay, and you're asking someone else if they're okay? You know, like, you have to be able to receive the answer. And if you're not okay, it's important that you access help as well. And not just try and put yourself out there all the time. So my grandmother is a counsellor, and she's a massive role model in my life. I mentioned before to Kirsty that this jacket is hers, or was hers until she gave it to me. But she has this analogy that she uses with a lot of she does supervision. So she works with counsellors in real settings, talking about how to self-care when you're caring for someone else. And she gave me this analogy where she spoke about someone who might be in a bit of a whirlpool. And they're getting stuck in the bottom, and they're sinking in, and they're spinning around, and their life is out of control. And out of instinct, the first thing someone might want to do is jump in and save them and drag them onto your boat. But from a self-care perspective, this is the last thing that you should be doing. You should be staying in your canoe and sending out your little like canoe stick thing, to drag them toward your boat. But something I want you guys to recognize from this is that it's so important to stay in your boat. Don't hop out of your boat. Don't risk your own safety, your own mental health, security to try and save someone else. This is, shared trauma is you don't need to share it. You need to get them to professionals. And what I've done prior to this talk is actually set up a list of resources that you can access at the link in my bio around how to access mental health in Australia. So there are hotlines, there are psychiatric triage services that are for crisis situations. So if someone's spinning out of control and they're in the whirlpool and you need someone's help, you can call up a CAT team and say, hey, I need your help. I need some advice. I've got a friend who's suffering or a family member who's suffering, and you can ask for support. And also they log the details so that if someone else calls, or if the individual themselves calls up, they have them recorded for any hospital admissions, and they know how serious it is. So for example, my own lived experience was that we didn't know early enough to go through community supports. Like, the typical way to access psychology care is go to your GP, you get a psychology referral and a mental health care plan, which, by the way, the mental health care plans have been extended from 10 therapy sessions to 20 therapy sessions during this pandemic period in Victoria. Get on it, peeps. Can recommend. But they generally prescribe you to go, they refer you to go see a psychologist. But in my situation, I was way past seeing a psychologist. I needed hospital intervention. I needed to go to hospital because it was that much of a crisis. So in that case, you call up the CAT team, or you call up 000 and you say, we have someone in a mental health emergency. And this is one of the big things that I've been advocating for recently is we currently have police, fire, and what's the other one? Police, fire, and ambulance as the three services that 000 supports. But what I've been really wishing, and a lot of consumer advocacy promotes, is a fourth line, which is a mental health crisis line, so that people can get specialist access to mental health. And in the link in my bio, I will link everyone to where they can sign the petition for the mental health crisis line, so that you can sign up and say, yes, we support this, because there's no point calling up the police or calling up the ambulance if they're not mental health trained. They're not, let's be real. And there's no point calling up the fire truck. We need a mental health service. So yeah, these things are all in the link in my bio. I'm going to move on from this topic now, but I want to share a bit about my mental health self-care habits that I've been adopting through COVID-19. A few of you have messaged me today and been like, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. Thank you guys. I love this discourse. Yeah, I'm actually doing okay. I am an essential worker at the moment, so I have to leave the home, and it's stressful and it's exhausting, and doing the whole COVID outfit and COVID safety every time is really hard, and going into people's homes is a risk factor for getting COVID-19. So I have been struggling with that, I must admit. And I'm very busy. COVID-19 has actually made me more busy. So yeah, I'm very productive at the moment, but I don't have the chance or the luxury. I wouldn't call it a luxury though, but I'm not relaxing or sleeping in or, just doing nothing. I have not cleaned my room. I have not spring cleaned the house. Everything is still the same mess it was the start of the year. But I'm getting there. So yeah. But my self-care. So I've learned that weekends are sacred. It's taken me 23 years to work out that weekends are sacred. When you go through uni, you're studying full time, you do your weekend job, you're in retail, in your hospo, and all of this stuff. And for a while this year, I was actually doing disability work on the weekends. But I've realized that now that I'm realizing the importance of weekends and rest for my self-care, I have cancelled a lot of my weekend plans in terms of work commitments, and I have a Monday to Friday work schedule, and honestly, it's changed everything. It's changed my life, and I'm so grateful for boundaries in the workplace. But I also understand that not everyone has the ability to do that. But what I'm noticing is that with retail and with hospo out of service at the moment, most of them are out of service. Perhaps this is a chance for you guys for the students in the space to find your weekends again and make them sacred, protected spaces for play and creativity and relationships and just existing and finding rest, So at this point in time, I have really found a lot of benefit from having safe weekends. I also wear earrings. I also do makeup a lot of days, and for me, makeup is not about putting on a mask. I think makeup, if anything, should exemplify your natural beauty and increase, how you feel about yourself. It is not something that you just cake on to avoid your own beauty. But for me, putting on makeup every day, and this applies to the women more so, but putting on makeup most days has actually been a way of stepping into character, stepping into a professional character headspace. And in a time when we have very little ways to claim space and things for ourselves, for me, when I wake up, when I put on my face, when I put on the red lips, which I'll get to later, I'm doing Liptember at the moment, so I'll get to that, ladies. When I put on the face, it acts as a ritual. And similar to a dance performance, I grew up dancing and I practice as a dancer now. When you're about to go onto stage, there is something like a ritual that putting on your makeup actually prepares you for the performance. And it's not like we're performing in day-to-day life, but we're getting into character. It's a professional character headspace. And so when we're working, when we're studying, when we're doing everything, even from our bedrooms, which I'm set up in my room at the moment, when we're working in these environments, it's important to have a few boundaries around that. And if you're able to somehow put on put on your makeup, and then wipe it off at the end of the day so that you know when you're in work mode and when you're in rest mode. That for me has been a self-care strategy. I also wear perfume. I don't do this every day because I love it so much and I want to protect it and make sure it doesn't run out. But for me, perfume and certain smells are linked to certain memories. So I have here my Olean perfume that I bought from Liberty London in the UK last year when I visited. And for me, whenever I put this on, it takes me back to my time in Europe. And it takes me back to a time where I was traveling and I was seeing the world and I was free, It's a really great time. And it also reminds me that it's a jasmine flavor. So it reminds me of the flowers in my family's front garden as well, which I brought to show you guys here. I've got some flowers that have been, keeping me going. And so when we have a smell linked to a positive memory, that can make positive feelings in us as well. So use perfume to your advantage. Use cologne to your advantage. Another self-care tip is getting out of your PJs. Wear clothes, not PJs. That's a huge one. Sometimes we can have PJ days and they're okay, but weekdays, maybe not. I also find that shifting location when shifting task has really helped me. As a dancer, I have a very embodied experience with movement, and movement is a very big part of my life. And so breaking up my day with location shifts, I think for me, getting up out of my seat and going up out to the decking outside and sitting outside and doing work out there has really helped the way I think about my work and my life and the transitions in my working day. It's been really good. Oh, there we go. You can see the candle more. Here we go. Making your bed is another one. And I've been bringing documentations of the outside world in. In Melbourne, we're currently only allowed 1 hour of outside time a day. It will extend to 2 hours on Sunday, which I'm very excited for. But for me, again, it's about bringing the outside world in. I've got my flowers. I take photos. So I live near the beach at the moment. And so when I walk down to the beach, I take videos of the waves. And sometimes I post them to my story. You guys might have seen them. And sometimes I just save them for myself. And I watch them back again. Or I just press play before bed. And I just listen to the sound of the waves, bringing the outside world in. I also find that when I'm walking and I have my camera out, automatically I look for beautiful things. And there's something really like a silent protest around looking for beautiful things when you're out and about. So yeah, and another suggestion I have is to have some sort of creative play. So I've been doing some painting with my brother. So I've been doing some, this is acrylic flow paintings. And I'm really proud of these because we did them collaboratively and it's really precious. But this is another one that I did. You can see all the different layers. And for me, having some sort of play-based practice is really important to my mental health. Having some sort of artistic, creative practice where you just forget about all the pressures and you're just playing. There's so much scientific, psychological evidence that suggests this promotes positive mental health. Okay, how are we doing for time? Oh my gosh, it's 7:23. So, a bit of an outline around mental health. I have been studying psychology for 3 years and I'm currently studying a graduate certificate in pastoral care. And I have been looking at mental health through the lens of the medical model, but also the lens of more of a spiritual aspect model. So my conviction is, and my kind of conclusion to date, is that mental health is made up of 4 factors. There's the biological, the psychological, the social, and the spiritual factors. So in summary, that could be called the biopsychosocial spiritual model. Now, biological factors are made up of things that are related to your genetics, how much exercise you're getting, how much food you eat, gut and mental health. There is so much research coming out into that at the moment. And yeah, all the things that are biological or made up of, it's kind of like the nature-nurture debate, that exist in your being, And then we've got the psychological factors, which is the reason we need to see psychologists in the world. So psychological factors include, how you think and your thought patterns, and if they're maladaptive or constructive. It also includes, how we experience the world. Any psychological treatment comes under this banner, and psychologists are the expert in this, and they train in this for 7 or 8 years just to get a down pat to support you. There's also social factors, so your friendship groups, or your societal existence, where you exist in society, your socioeconomic status. These sorts of things come under the social banner. And then the spiritual factors, which is something I've only come across this year, explore how we make meaning with the world. It also explores how we give and receive love, how our relationships, which kind of relates to social as well. And it also explores how we explore and exist and encounter hope, and encounter creativity and have our sense of identity in the world. So all of these factors come all together. So I've got here also another book that if you want to learn more about kind of models of mental health, I've been looking at Lost Connections by Johann Hari recently, and he talks about, aspects of depression that could expand upon the traditional medical model, and include some sort of spiritual factors, which is about how we connect and relate and have relationships, and how we encounter hope, all of these things, how we have purpose in the world, our purpose in life. I can also recommend Johann Hari on YouTube. He's got some great TED Talks on addiction and on mental health. Some other things to note during a pandemic, though, is during COVID-19, we have certain vulnerabilities, and we are a little more susceptible to stress, if you have noticed. One thing I've seen coming around through research and even on Instagram is this term called surge capacity. So it basically looks at traditionally in a crisis, we have a surge capacity that reaches a certain threshold, and it's expected we can operate at this level, but then it's expected over time for this to return back to normal. And so we're not in an emergency situation all the time. But with COVID-19, it's 100 plus days since we've been in the first lockdown. And this is an extended emergency. And so our surge capacity is up here, but it's weakening and waning. And we are seeing the ramifications in the rest of our lives, and just our tolerance for stress and our exhaustion levels. There's an analogy that I like to use as well with a jar around mental health and this smells around mental health. And this jar I've just put together, you can see here, this is your genetic factors. So this is what you're born with, your pre-existing vulnerabilities that you inherited from your parents and your grandparents and the people before them. And so we are all born with this genetic vulnerability. But let's say the threshold for mental illness to develop is just there. So what I'm going to do is pour some water into here. Can you see it? You can see here. At this point, we're stressed, the water is stress. The water is like life stress that just comes into play. So at this point, we have not reached the threshold, which is the marker here, but we're experiencing stress, and we're fine. We're functioning. Day-to-day life is okay. But then what happens is when we keep adding more stress, for example, during a pandemic, this threshold just keeps increasing more and more and more, and you can see that we've passed this threshold. And for some people during the pandemic, mental illness will arise, and that's because we're in such a heightened state of stress all the time. And we've passed the threshold, which is an issue. And at that point, you need to be accessing mental health care from a professional and asking for help and building in protective mechanisms, and that would look like adding on things like self-care things that I just shared, like just previously, adding on extra sleep, adding on healthy food, adding on, we're making the jar a lot taller, and this really helps to protect us from mental health. Positive relationships, saying no to things, saying yes to good things, accessing a psychologist, taking medication, seeing a psychiatrist, taking medication. These things all add up, and they all help. They all take the pressure off the stress that we exist in our lives. So just a few possible indications of mental illness that you might be facing, or someone that you love might be facing. We've reached past this threshold, and some symptoms could express themselves as bizarre or unusual thinking. So someone's just not thinking right at the moment. Confusion or disorientation, destructive or high-risk behavior, hallucinations. So a hallucination is a signature of more complex mental health issues, and often we don't realize that they're not real, but they feel real. They feel like you can't escape them, and that they're petrifying. And so a hallucination could be you could see or hear or feel or taste something that's not actually there. There could also be problems with functioning in your work or social life. You could be restless, you could be agitated, you could have disorganized behavior or a marked decrease in activity. Significant changes in mood. So traditionally we think mental illness is like you have low mood. That's true. But it can also be a high mood. You can have a heightened mood for an extended period of time. This is known as mania. And it's like feeling really happy and you think, oh, the world is the best, but it's also often associated with agitation or restlessness, and risk-taking, high risk-taking, and it's not safe. You're not safe. So you can also have suicidal thoughts or acts of self-harm. This is something really to look out for. And Are You Okay Day today actually is the same day as National Suicide Prevention Day in Australia that Lifeline is celebrating today as well. So I want to do a shout out to them. And also something else you might experience is delusions or false beliefs. You feel something is real but is not. But yeah, these things all summate to what could be an identifying factor for mental illness. And at this point, if you know, again, we're on Are You Okay Day today. If you see something like this happening in a friend, just tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, are you okay? And if maybe they respond, maybe they don't, maybe they don't know something's wrong, they can't see it themselves, they don't have the insight. This is a big term we use in psychology, insight, to know that something is wrong. And maybe this is when, you know, you need to take them by the hand and take them to the GP to get the checkup. Or maybe this is when you talk to their parents or their carer, and there are resources. Again, I stress, in my bio, there are resources for you guys to access on this. Yeah, so one thing I want to talk about, though, with mental illness, I think it's one of the most discriminated against forms of disability in the world. So many people have it, but yet we don't feel like we can talk openly about it. And for me, during my, first couple of years of being diagnosed as having a mental health issue, I felt like I had to hide it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a stage that you're at. But I felt like I couldn't share openly about my experiences, and I've come a long way, and I'm really pleased to be sharing this Instagram live with you guys today, because it shows that recovery is possible and stigma does not always win. So I want to talk to you guys about different types of stigma. So there's kind of two categories for stigma. There's public stigma, which we have in society, and then there's self-stigma, which exists in ourselves. And so I'm going to touch on public stigma at the moment first. So they exist, public stigma exists firstly as a stereotype, which is basically an expressed negative belief about a group, and expressed as feelings of dangerousness, character weakness. Have you guys ever heard of that being called, like someone with mental illness being say, oh, their character's just poor, or they're dangerous? I've heard that so many times before, and it breaks my heart. So that is a stereotype. But then a step up from stereotype is prejudice. Prejudice exists when we have an agreement with a belief or a negative emotional reaction to the belief. So it can often be expressed as anger or fear. So how many times have we said, oh, that person's dangerous, therefore we're fearful? For example, the way the media portrays mental illness is actually like some of the cause, like the causation for this type of stigma to exist. And this is where the media has so much to be held accountable for in how they talk about mental illness. Mental illness is not a character weakness, and mental illness does not make someone dangerous. That is not true. Someone who is dangerous is they're more likely to be harmed by someone else. They're more likely to be in harm's way than to be a danger to someone else. And then within the public arena, there exists discrimination from all, in addition to these things. This is basically a behavioral response to prejudice, and it's expressed as avoidance or withholding employment, withholding help. And this particular one, the discrimination that people with mental illness face, actually highlights so much about what we need to change in society and why advocacy is just so important. Why Are You Okay Day is just so important. And upcoming is World Mental Health Day in October. So important to acknowledge that we need to advocate for mental health. But then, that's on a societal level. Let's bring this in an internal level. And this is where it hits home for a lot of people, because this is the stuff that we face in our own skin, the stuff that prevents us from getting help, and the reasoning and the logic that we use to say, no, we don't need it, we're too much of a burden, like all of these things. So stereotypes are a negative belief about the self. So they often express themselves as feelings of character weakness or incompetence. So if you have a mental health diagnosis or a mental health issue, often, a stereotype would be to say that I have a character weakness because of that. That is not true. But if I internalize the public belief, that's what it would look like. Prejudice. Prejudice is an agreement with the belief, a negative emotional reaction. It's embodied as low self-esteem, low self-efficacy. So I don't know who's watching right now, but if you feel that you have low self-esteem, you don't deserve anything, you're just not good at life at all, and you're also living with mental illness, what you're actually experiencing is self-stigma. That's what you're experiencing. Let's label it. Let's put a name on it. Let's put it out there and say this is because of stigma. And this is why advocacy matters. This is why you matter. And then on top of all of this, people with mental illness have received discrimination and discriminate against themselves, for goodness sake. And it's a behavioral response to prejudice, and often it expresses itself as a failure to pursue help, failure to pursue work, failure to pursue opportunities. And so you can see here how complex mental health actually is, but also how the expressions of stigma, both public and self, stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination all interplay, and how it's so important to receive help and just to reach out and not give up until you get the support that you need. You matter. And so that brings me to my point on accessing mental health supports. I don't know where everyone's tuning in from at the moment. Maybe type in the comments, where are you from? I know a lot of people are from Melbourne. I've seen some people are from the UK. Anyone else from the UK or anywhere else? That's all right. We'll keep plodding along. So we all have different mental health systems across the world. They're not, they don't run concurrently, unfortunately, yet. But in Australia, we have a specific mental health system. And generally, if you're coming from the community, you can go see a counsellor, or you can go through your local GP to get a mental health care plan to see a psychologist, and you can also get referrals to see psychiatrists. And from a mental health perspective, if you think you've got things that you're working through, it would be helpful to have someone from an outsider perspective come in. I always think of a person in therapy is like they've got a ball of knotted up wool in their head. And then the therapist is just knitting away, just making a neat ball of the wool and fixing it into order, helping you make sense of it. So that's what therapy offers you. And it should be accessible by all people. And you don't need a mental health condition to access therapy. And this is where, in the resources that I've posted, there are links to free counseling, free relationship counseling. You can do it by telehealth at the moment. I will also touch on very shortly on how to access different types of therapists if you want to pay for their services and consult with a therapist over a longer period of time. So counselors are really good. Other types of counselors or therapists exist that are narrative therapists. So I've just started engaging with a narrative therapist, and she is incredible, and can recommend narrative therapy for anyone, particularly if anyone's experienced some sort of discrimination in their life. It's really helpful to restory your story, reauthor your story, and frame it in a way that helps you find the strength of your own self, helps you realize your own strength. So narrative therapy is really great. You can go to the Dulwich Centre, just search up on Google, the Dulwich Centre, for more information on this. They've got heaps of resources. There's also psychotherapy. There is psychoanalytic psychotherapy. So you can go to the Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy Association of Australasia. They're kind of like old school psychology stuff, but it's really, really helpful. If that's your style, that's your jam, go for it. There's also Psychotherapy Association Psychotherapy and Counselling as well, which PACFA is a great resource for you. There's the ACA, which is all about Australian counsellors. And Zakata is all about art therapy, which is amazing. I love art therapy. My grandmother is also an art therapist, so we have spent many a time doing paintings and just looking at them and reflecting on them, and what do they say about us? How does it reflect your mental health? Another one is, of course, gold standard, Australian Psychological Society. So you can go onto the APS's website and search up different psychologists, look at their specializations, and when you go to a GP for a mental health care plan to get subsidized psychology support, they're going to refer you onto a psychologist. So if you already know what sort of psychologist you would like to see or their name, take that to your GP with you. They might have some recommendations that you don't know about, which is awesome, but you can also bring to them suggestions for your own care as well. So we've got all of that. I also want to really push with you guys is that when someone's seeing a psychologist, there's or a counselor or any therapist for that matter, often you feel like you have to stick it out, and even if it's not a good fit. But can I just affirm that your gut instincts knows shit, and that it matters to you. Like it should matter that you have a good fit with your psychologist or counselor. So if something doesn't feel right, or you just don't vibe the whole time, like maybe you see them once or twice and you still feel that way, seeing a psychologist is like seeing a good hairdresser. You don't go back to the shitty hairdressers that do a bad hair job, you know? Like, you want to see someone. This is your mind, for goodness sake. This is your brain. This matters. Don't just settle. See someone that is going to help you. And there are so many types of therapy out there. I'm sure you will be able to find an access point. So yeah, search up different associations. There's drama therapy, there's dance therapy, there's art therapy, there's narrative therapy, there's counseling, there's psychoanalytic psychotherapy, there's psychotherapy, there's so many, there's psychology. And then even within the psychology realm, there are clinical psychologists which can diagnose mental illness. So if you have a mental health diagnosis, it's good to see a clinical psych. They know how to deal with that. And there are also psychiatrists that can also diagnose mental health issues, and they are able to prescribe medication as well. So that's kind of how the medical sort of counseling, psychiatry space works. But I can recommend, if you want more information, look up the associations on Google. Just search whichever type of therapy you're interested in. Have a play with it. Reach out to someone. Send them an email or a phone call and say, hey, I'd like to know more about your practice. And then maybe engage with them. There's no better time to be doing it than during lockdown right now. And finally, we're almost at the end, but I want to encourage you guys to seek peer support as well. So if you're going through something, there's nothing better than having a peer come alongside you and say, hey, I know what you're going through. I've been there. You know, this is essentially what I'm trying to do right now. Guys, I've been there and I know what it's like, and it's overwhelming and exhausting, and stigma is existent and it's stressful. But you deserve the best quality healthcare. And peer support is another way to learn more about your mental health and to support other people. There are mental health support groups that can be specific to your needs. For example, Headspace has awesome ones. I've also listed a number of organizations in the mental health resources in my bio that you can look up their websites and see if they have any places to go to. I can also recommend Black Dog Institute, which the website is in the document in my bio. They have a list of support groups state by state in Australia. So you can go there, you can look at your state, and you can sign up to one or connect with them. Yes, peer support represent, great plug. Thank you, Christopher. I just want to also push from this that it is so important to have what's described as consumer leadership wherever we are. So if you have mental health issues going on, deal with your shit, get it organized, recover. Recovery is more circular than linear, let's be real. But you do need to access support, but then feed it on to someone else. Mentor someone or get a mentor yourself. For me, that looked like starting my career in psychology. We need more diversity in the field of psychology, and I have posted, if any of you follow me on Facebook, I've posted many a times about my career in psychology and how it is informed by my lived experience, and that is a rarity, but it is so important. So yeah, as just finishing up, I want to recommend that you guys get onto the resources in my bio. It is also September, so I'm wearing red lipstick for a reason tonight. Any gals out there, if you're interested, it's September, raising awareness for women's mental health, which is also quite under-researched. But yeah, so I'll be posting links in my bio as well to where you can sponsor me, and if you're interested, PM me, we can join a team together or something. Basically, you get to wear lipstick for all of September and have a reason to do it and get people to donate to mental health research. So that's really cool. And before I leave you, I want to share a poem that I came across recently by Patricia Deegan. She's a lived experience advocate, and she wrote this poem, "You carry within you a precious flame." So let me share it with you and let it wash over you. Hope you enjoy it. So, you may have been diagnosed with mental illness, but you are not an illness. You are a human being whose life is precious and of infinite value. You are precious and good. You are not trash to be discarded or a broken object that must be fixed. You are not insane. You do not belong in institutions for the rest of your life. You don't belong on the streets. You are a human being. You carry within you a precious flame, the spark of the divine. You were born to love and be loved. That's your birthright. Mental illness cannot take that away from you. Nobody can take that away from you. All right, thanks guys. That sums up my chat about mental health on our UK Day. Make sure you check in with yourself, check in with others, check in with the resources that are there. And if you have any questions, feel free to PM me. Or comment below. I'll stay online for a few questions if you want. But yeah, thanks for joining, and best wishes to you.